Okay. Um, it's worth thinking then about how this poem, Caged Bird by Maya Angelou, communicates the idea of freedom. And um, there are some important things to say about it. Um, and they're quite simple, really. One is that when you look at the repetitions, such as here, and when you look at the very short lines, a free bird leaps with his on the back of the wind, with two stresses a piece each time. When you look at all that, and when you look at the rhymes and so on, you're looking at something that is almost like a kind of spiritual, a kind of song, a hymn, something that belongs perhaps to an oral culture, um, but that has its own music to it. So spirituals is a word for the hymns and songs that people who were enslaved would sing.
Wait, so how would you refer that? Would you talk about Caged Bird's rhythm is incredibly has spiritual.
Well, when I use the word spiritual, I'm using it as a noun, and what that means is so you would talk about a song as a spiritual. So what they'd often be based in the Bible. So there's one called "Let My People Go," and there's one
Yeah,
famous one, "Nobody knows the trouble I see, Lord." And you've got that kind of song-like thing
yeah,
going on,
yeah,
which is very important to the way Maya Angelou writes. You could say, and I'm aware that we haven't even spoken about a word that she's actually written yet, but the way it's written is very much to do with freedom. And you could say there's a certain kind of irony here, that there's a fairly regular rhythm, there's a fairly regular rhyme, and what's more, this poem is based on, or takes
yeah,
its kind of motto, its mantra,
yeah.
I know why the caged bird sings, um, from a poem by Paul Lawrence Dunbar.
So its rhythm is kind of its structure is quite clamped down,
I
would
would
you
say
say?
that it's got, on the one hand, you could argue either way. You could
Yeah,
either argue that it's quite controlled
yeah,
with a refrain, quite like a song. So that's called a refrain, when you
yeah,
repeat lines of a song almost like a chorus.
yeah.
Do you see what I mean? It's almost, you could sing it.
A
You
chorus
really could
like a
sing it.
bird song.
Or, yeah, actually, that's really important. So the idea of singing
Yeah,
is like what a bird does.
yeah.
And you could say that,
It's a choral poem.
yeah, that
Um,
that the bird is singing in quite a controlled way,
yeah,
and the poem's quite controlled, and a bird is confined by its cage. So this
yeah,
this
yeah. Is ironic.
this is almost like a kind of plea for freedom that comes from not being free,
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
rhythm and the rhyme reflect that.
yeah,
But it's also important, I think, that you think about the tradition of slaves singing songs
yeah,
like "Let My People Go," like "I'm going to lay down my heavy load." Those kind of chants that they would sing.
yeah,
And the horrible irony is that also those songs
yeah,
they a slave would sing in order to maintain the rhythm of the work, but the song would be expressing the feeling, I don't want to be doing this work. I
yeah,
don't want to be owned by another man. I don't want to be in bondage or a bondsman or woman.
yeah, mm,
Um, so there's all that tradition to it. So on the one hand, it's powerful, it's new, it's what you might have considered when she wrote this a less heard voice, a black American woman who ended up in 1992 being the poet who delivered the inaugural poem for President Clinton. So she came from the Deep South and that world of segregation to become one of the most respected and influential voices
yeah,
in poetry.
yeah,
And so you could say that she attained that
yeah,
kind of freedom,
yeah,
but this is a really important snapshot on the journey. So let's look at the essay topic, and if you break it down structurally into the building blocks of this poem, you've got properly juxtaposition.
yeah,
Juxtaposition literally mean the putting next together, the putting
yeah,
next to of stuff. So you've got here free bird, stanza 1, not free bird, stanza 2. Still not free bird, stanza 3.
Yeah.
Free bird, stanza 4. Not free bird, stanza 5.
And free bird.
And then not free bird, stanza the last stanza 6, which is a repetition of this one.
Okay.
So these sort of thoughts on free bird versus not free bird are interrupted by this kind of chorus. Not interrupted; they're kind of anchored by this chorus. So let's look at the actual words, because we now know that we're looking for contrast between this stanza and this stanza. So juxtaposition. Between freedom of freedom and confinement, slavery. I mean, it is slavery. It comes from a time when there weren't slaves, but there was still segregation in the southern states of America.
I've noticed that the first verse is
shows the contrast.
Yeah, the first verse is mentions wind and streams and floating and rays and sky.
Yeah.
All of those things are. It's not anything to do with the art, but all these things are elements.
Yeah.
Which obviously come from, which obviously aren't man-made, and they're not clamped, and they're very free to express. They change all the time.
It's a brilliant point.
Whereas they, as you say, it's in contrast to this trapped bird, but the free bird leaps. So it's like it's telling us how free the bird, how free nature should be.
Yes, that's absolutely right. When you contrast the things, so to pick up on your point, yes, these are elements. They're natural. They're made by nature, God, whoever, wind, downstream, current, sun.
Yeah.
Whereas we've got man-made things here. Narrow cage.
It's a bit like
bars,
amends.
clipped. It is a bit like amends. In fact, we'll
very
come
similar.
to that. There's something else I want you to notice about the grammar. You may or may not know what a passive verb is and an active verb is, but when you're looking at a line of poetry or a line of anything,
one that's not going anywhere else,
right? It's really important to see who's doing what.
Yeah.
In a sentence.
Yeah.
So what we have here is passive versus active. So these are active
so leaping
verbs.
And
can you see the free bird is doing the leaping?
Yeah.
So, and we call that an active verb because the subject here, the free bird, is doing the leaping.
Yeah.
It floats downstream. It dips his wings. It can do what it damn well wants.
You've got the stalks and
yes,
narrow cake, clipped, tied.
And this is the important thing. It's his wings are clipped. So it's not like he clips its own wings.
Yeah.
We're not told someone clips his wings. Yeah. His wings are clipped, and we call that, when something is done to you, we call that a passive verb. And what we've got here in stanza 1 is all active verbs, and in stanza 2,
passive.
We've got at least we've got 2 passive verbs. You don't have any here.
Yeah.
So stuff is done to the caged bird, and we see this. And we've got this repetition again. His wings are clipped.
Did you say stanza 3 was supposed to be? Or it's also a refrain. It's not a. You'd say that was positive.
It's striking, isn't it?
Yeah.
What you get here is a weird kind of fusion, don't you? A kind of. We've said that you get free, caged, back to caged, but actually, what you get in stanza 3 and also in its repetition in stanza 6, you get a kind of synthesis, a kind of fusion of the bird being caged, but having a strong idea of the freedom it wants to claim. He wants to claim, because we notice it's got a he here. It's not an it, this bird. It's humanised almost.
What's humanised?
Well, the fact that we've got his rather than its. So let's look then at this refrain, because clearly it's important to the poet. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill.
Of things unknown.
Yeah, but longed for still. You know, it's
Yeah.
that sense, isn't it, that there's a world beyond your cage. You don't know what it is.
Yeah,
You just want
yeah.
the right to make your own
You
mistakes.
just want
and
the
to
right
forge
to
your way
not
in
be
it.
where you are now.
Exactly.
It's like you don't even wish for anything more, you just wish for
Yeah.
what you don't have now.
Yeah. And you could say, oh, the grass is always greener, and you get out of the cage.
Yeah.
No, I don't care. That's the point.
Yeah.
Anywhere but this. So long as it's on my
Yeah.
own terms, life can be as
Yeah.
terrible as possible. Bring it on. I just don't want to be here. It has
Yeah.
to be up to me. I want active verbs. I don't want
Yeah.
passive verbs anymore. And so we do have oh look, we have his tune is heard. Okay. And that's another passive. It's it's almost good luck rather than planning that someone just happens to hear.
Is there such thing as positive and negative passives? Because surely
Yes.
it's the same thing, a passive and a passive.
But
It's like saying it's the but would you, because that's, if his tune is heard, it's different from saying his wings are clipped.
yes, that's true. Yes. But you've still got that sort of compromised power.
Yeah.
You've still got that sense that the bird is
It's out of his control.
out of his control.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not, yeah.
So
It's
the
not up to him who hears
yeah.
him, and it's not up to him who clips his
yeah.
wing.
And you could almost argue that actually that's the human situation.
Yeah.
That you're really relying on enlightened readers
External
of poetry.
forces to, I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Something beyond your control.
Yeah.
It's not even in your control if you get control.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very like amends, this poem.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to look at some of those verbs, you've got the floats, the dips,
Yeah.
the absolute freedom, the sort of, as you say, the elements, the limitless space in which a free bird can exist. And then, but a bird that stalks, it's
Down his
if you think about what that verb does.
So if you replace that word
there's something
bird
ashamed about it.
with a person, I'm just thinking because I feel like if you take out the word bird, then it brings more. Do you know what I mean? Because you kind of think, if you think about a bird, it's limited.
Yes.
Whereas if it said a human that stalks down in his house, cannot see through the bars of rage.
Yes. I think that's right.
His feet are tied. So it's.
Well, I mean, the terrifying thing is you're right.
So it is all about lack of speech and freedom and being able, and the irony as well is that there's a world out there that's so big and so limitless and so powerful, yet this one person, or bird, doesn't even have the freedom to express himself. Yeah.
Let's take your argument and see how far it goes.
Yeah.
Spoiler, I think it goes really very far. There's a special word for a poem or a story. Animal Farm is one.
Allegory.
And it's called an allegory. I mean, we looked at not waving but drowning as an extended metaphor.
Yeah.
But when you extend the metaphor so far that it becomes a kind of story, like a fable, you have to kind of think, oh, that's about us. So what you've just done with your experiment there, you've thought, is this about humans? Could it be about humans? Could it be an allegory where you just think it's a way of... But then you went a step further. You started saying things like, yes, but actually when you look at words like caged, when you look at his feet are tied, what's really shocking is that happened to human beings.
Yeah.
Apart from the word bird, you could say, but okay, humans can't fly. But by the time you get to the condition of the caged bird, that's actually how humans were kept. If you think about the slave ships, if you think about being tied up, if you think about being owned in tiny confined quarters, actually, it goes beyond the metaphor. It goes beyond the allegory. This kind of animalistic language, what we sometimes call zoomorphism, as in making a situation more like that which would pertain to a beast, is actually, you could say, a description. It's just a description, only with the word bird in it.
Yeah.
So we begin to see In these horrific words, narrow cage, this confined language, and that rhyme there, you know, that sort of human, not bird-like, but human response, rhymed with cage, and the rage it causes you, we begin to see actual a recollection of how human beings were actually treated. So there's that historical dimension, which I think would have played strongly on the ears of the hearers. I say hearers because it to return to our very first point, it's such an oral piece of writing.
Yes. Yeah.
Grave of dreams. We haven't really talked about the language of death
Grave
versus
of dreams,
life.
that's weird. So it's like, so we've talked about that through rage, cage, passive.
Yeah.
But the caged bird sings with a fearful trill.
Yeah.
Of things unknown.
Yeah.
But longed for still.
Yeah.
So even though he doesn't know what he's getting, even though he could be getting the worst, even though this person could be, it's like it's just like pain as well. Like it's almost like the free bird thinks of another breeze.
Yeah.
What would you say about that verse there? The worms waiting for a dawn bright lawn, and the fat worms waiting on dawn.
Again, look at these word trade winds, by the way. We've talked a little bit about how you could actually just take lots of these words which seem like metaphors or seem part of an extended image, and then think, oh, but they are to do with slavery.
Yeah.
That is, you know, the idea of trade between continents is what made slavery happen. And it's right there.
So why does it say, if it's comparing that to slavery, so it says, the trade winds soft through the sighing trees. So the sighing trees, is that an expression of the movement of the trees, or the sighing, the kind of the lack of freedom, the lack of like sense of self of the people? Yeah,
when you flagged up that line, my first thought was, oh yeah, listen to the long vowel sounds. It's so lyrical.
So it's basically,
but you're right.
Yeah.
The sighing trees, what are they sighing about?
It's exchanging
nature weeps
for mankind.
Yeah. Yes.
The birds are becoming humanised, and the nature is becoming humanised, and the trees are. Yes,
exactly. That's a lovely point. That this bird wants to be part of that nature, but it isn't. It's barbarically.
So that would be a personification.
Yes, we sometimes call it. And this term does get overused, but when nature starts feeling like human beings, we sometimes call it pathetic fallacy.
Yes, yeah.
I'm going to put it with a question mark.
I thought you'd use pathetic fallacy more if it was to do with the feelings that nature evoked on humans.
Yeah.
So like rain, if it was like the weather.
Yeah.
Would you say you could use?
Yeah, it's possibly a good moment to explain that term, pathetic fallacy. What I understand by a fallacy means a mistake.
And why is it saying, what is that?
I'll come back to that.
That line, and the fat worms waiting on dawn bright lawn.
It's almost mocking, isn't it?
Yeah, but why would it say fat? Because they're so well fed and treated, and but they're still waiting for more.
Yeah, even the worms are free. I mean, seriously. They can. Oh, look at you, multitude.
So it's like saying, even those who. What does that say? So it is mocking. It is mocking. It's kind of saying, "Oh, look at you."
I think so. Yeah, but also look at just. But it's possibly worth looking at the alliteration here and the internal rhyme there.
What dawn lawn?
Yeah. I think when we're talking about the free bird, that Angelou turns on a kind of lyrical mode. She goes super poetic. Fat worms. There's a kind of, and I know we've used this word before, opulence. There's a kind of luxury about it, like in Isabel Dixon's bathtub.
Yeah.
There's another rhyme, by the way. I don't know if we can claim this as a rhyme, but the word claim, to claim the sky and to name the sky your own. It's that kind of entitlement that means that the free bird can say, I don't care, this is mine.
Yeah.
Now, to sum up, I think one thing worth saying, if we're asking the question, how does Maya Angelou communicate the idea of freedom here?
Yes.
An important point is to say, well, she does it by contrasting it with the lack of freedom.
Yeah.
So you could say this is a poem as much about confinement
that it is about freedom.
There's one last big, deep and meaningful point I want to make about this. We talked a little earlier about this line, opens his, and his tune is heard on the distant hill.
Yeah.
That kind of almost like a prayer that
Yeah.
the song will be heard.
So would you say this is like weird, but would you say this poem is religious?
I would say it's got religious things about it, and I would say its music is religious.
So would you say it's got a religious connotation?
For the ear, it does, and I would certainly.
Says, I mean, I know these elements that you can't really say they're all to do with God.
No.
But then it says his tune is heard. So it's like a higher power.
Yeah.
It's like it is talking about a higher power.
Well, even if you just take the word freedom, this is an abstract noun, and it's prayed for, I would say.
So what does that do? What effect does that have?
Well, it's almost like, if you have an abstract noun,
yeah,
it's almost like a kind of God, isn't it? If you think about what an abstract noun is, you can't see it, touch it, taste it, feel it. It's not.
Yeah.
And it's the same true. The same is true of God. I mean, whatever you do with God in your poem, it's God isn't.
God isn't a happy or a sad.
Yeah, he's not represented as a contactable person in lots of poems, and so you could read it as a kind of prayer. There's one other thing I want to say about this poem. It's quite a big one. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill. Now, Maya Angelou wrote a book. She wrote 4 or 5 books of memoir about her childhood, growing up, getting involved with human rights and the civil rights movement, that kind of thing. And the first volume of that book, I think it was the first one, was called "I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings," and that takes its title from the poem by Paul Laurence Dunbar. Now, it's odd, isn't it? Because to sing, or to express yourself, is often a mark of having freedom of speech, of having the right to express yourself. And sometimes, and people say this about Soviet Russia as well and other regimes, sometimes people say, odd, isn't it, that some of the best art has come out of censorship, out of oppression. And a lot of people say, well, that may be so, but it doesn't excuse the oppression. And then other people say, well, not only does it not excuse the oppression, but when you actually look at that art, it's quite often sideways, it's quite often cryptic, the messages are hidden.
So this is a cryptic poem as well.
Well, what I find interesting about this poem is it says that a caged bird sings with a fearful trill. And you've got to imagine this whole poem is itself that fearful trill. It's saying, I don't know who's going to read this poem. I don't know who's going to pick up on what I want. I don't know who's going to be receptive to the idea that Afro-Caribbean, African-American people need liberating in the southern states, need equal representation. But I'm going to put it out anyway, and this is the song of a caged bird.
Okay.